Call the Committee on Transportation and Infrastructure to order. Pursuant to Committee Rule 6F and House Rule 11, Clause 2, HF, the chairman may postpone further proceedings today on any question of approving any measure or matter or adopting an amendment in which a recorded vote of the yeas and nays are ordered. I ask unanimous consent that the chairman be authorized to declare a recess at any time during today's meeting. Without objection, that's so ordered. A bill and amendment text have been distributed electronically, and paper copies are available here in the hearing room. As a reminder, the committee may use an electronic system for requested recorded votes. Today, the committee is considering an amendment in the nature of a substitute to H.R. 3055, transitioning, retiring, and new service members to Port, Ocean, Rail, and Truck Jobs Act, or the Transport Jobs Act. An amendment in the nature of a substitute to H.R. 3423, Facility for Runway Operations and Safe Transportation Act, or the FROST Act. H.R. 3477, Ensuring Airline Resiliency to Reduce Delays and Cancellations Act. An amendment in the nature of a substitute to H.R. 2591, the Mental Health and Aviation Act of 2025, H.R. 3331, Mariner Exam Modernization Act. An amendment in the nature of a substitute to H.R. 3427, Water Resources Technical Assistance Review Act. H.R. 3428, Mid-Atlantic River Basin Commissions Review Act. H.R. 3424, Shared Property Agency Collaboration and Engagement of 2025, or the Space Act of 2025. An amendment in the nature of a substitute to H.R. 3425, Personnel Oversight and Shift Tracking Act of 2025, or the Post Act of 2025. H.R. 3426, Courthouse Affordability and Space Efficiency, the Case Act of 2025, and 30 General Services Administration Capital Investment and Leasing Program resolutions. Finally, I'd ask unanimous consent for the committee to use an amendments roster for any items under consideration by the committee. Without objection, that is so ordered. Our first item for consideration is H.R. 3055, the Transport Jobs Act, and I'd ask unanimous consent to discharge the Subcommittee on Railroads, Pipelines, and Hazardous Materials from further consideration of H.R. 3055, and without objection, that is so ordered. I now call up the bill for consideration. Without objection, the first reading of the bill is dispensed with. The bill is now considered as read and open for amendment at any point. And I now recognize Mr. Barrett to offer his amendment in the nature of a substitute.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have an amendment at the desk.
Please designate.
An amendment in the nature of a substitute to H.R. 3055, offered by Mr. Barrett.
Without objection, the amendment in the nature of a substitute shall be considered as read and shall be considered as a base text for purposes of further amendment. I now recognize Mr. Barrett for 5 minutes for his opening or for his statement.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and appreciate your willingness to bring this bill for consideration before the committee. And I'm proud to have introduced H.R. 3055, the Transport Jobs Act, alongside my colleagues, Representatives Skolton, Bost, and Gillen. I came home from the Army on an assignment a little over a decade ago and was shocked to find that so many veterans in Michigan were struggling to find opportunities for work. These were well-educated, highly trained, and highly capable people that were struggling to find opportunities and meaningful employment in Michigan. And at the time, Michigan had the second highest veteran unemployment rate in the entire country. I know that no one is better trained or more mission-focused than our veterans, regardless of what branch they served in. But many are struggling to find employment still, and our veteran unemployment rate tends to exceed the overall unemployment rate in the economy, leaving behind opportunities for veterans. But I'm hopeful this bill will provide a solution to that, or a part of a solution. This bill takes a holistic approach to connect veterans to the supply chain workforce by requiring the collaboration between the Department of Transportation, the Department of Labor, the Department of Defense, and the VA. It will be known as the Veteran to Supply Chain Employee Action Plan, and these agencies can help pinpoint the barriers that veterans face in accessing the supply chain workforce and identifying the retention and recruitment challenges within the supply chain for employees. I can point specifically to examples of transferability of licensure and qualification and experience and other things that veterans acquire while they are in service that may not be immediately transferable, that we can work toward streamlining those types of situations. This collaboration, combined with the insight of the transportation supply chain industry and the organizations that support it, will provide short and long-term comprehensive strategies to connect veterans to the supply chain workforce and highlight areas where employees can reach, employee outreach and existing initiatives can be enhanced, Again, Mr. Chairman, I want to thank you for bringing the Transport Jobs Act to the committee for consideration today, and I look forward to putting the Veteran Supply Chain Action Plan into motion. And with that, I yield back.
Recognize Mr. Larson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I support H.R. 3055 as amended, the Transport Act, which is introduced by Representatives Barrett, Skolton, and Boston. This bill requires the Secretary to develop an action plan that identifies supply chain job needs at ports, railroads, and trucking companies in consultation with the Secretaries of Defense, Veterans Affairs, and Labor, and the transportation supply chain industry, including organizations representing transportation workers. Hardworking, dedicated women and men who have served our country in the armed forces are a great fit for supply chain jobs once they enter civilian life. These women and men deserve all the support we can give in accessing the good jobs that exist in transportation. The Bureau of Labor Statistics recently announced the nation's unemployment rate is 4.1%, and the unemployment rate among veterans is now 3.8%. This committee, though, has enacted numerous bills over the last decade to ease the way for veterans to obtain a commercial driver's license, a requirement for a job in trucking. The review required by this bill can similarly ease the transition for veterans into jobs in rail and at ports. So, Mr. Chair, with that, I support this bipartisan bill and recommend that my colleagues do the same. I yield back.
Mr. Webster.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm proud to support H.R. 3055, which was introduced by a colleague, Mr. Barrett. Members of the armed forces often possess skills necessary to fill crucial roles in our supply chain and yet face challenges in seeking this type of employment. H.R. 3055 removes barriers for active duty service members and veterans to fill those critical supply chain roles. This bill is a small way we can assist those who have served our country while also strengthening our nation's supply chain workforce. Yield back. Yield back.
Ms. Skolton.
Thank you, Chair Graves, Ranking Member Larson, for giving us the opportunity to hear these critically important bipartisan bills. I'm so proud to support the Transport Jobs Act with the leadership of my fellow Michigander and incredible veteran himself, Mr. Barrett. Our nation is nothing without our servicemen and women. Veterans who have selflessly served our country should never have to face barriers in finding employment. The Transport Jobs Act will play a key role in removing barriers and streamlining the process to career post-service, while also working to keep our supply chains running. It's truly a win-win. I urge my colleagues to support the Transport Jobs Act and ensure veterans are connected to high-demand jobs in the transportation sector. Thank you. I yield back.
Anyone else wish to be heard on the amendment in the nature of a substitute? Seeing no one, are there any amendments to the amendment in the nature of a substitute to H.R. 3055? Hearing none, and I would urge my colleagues to support this. But hearing none, the question is on the adoption of the amendment in the nature of a substitute to H.R. 3055. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All opposed signify by saying nay. The opinion of the chair, the ayes have it. The amendment in the nature of substitute is adopted. The question is now on adoption and favorable reporting of H.R. 3055 as amended. All those in favor signify by saying aye. All those opposed signify by saying nay. In the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it. The ayes do have it. And H.R. 3055 as amended is agreed to and ordered favorably reported to the House. And without objection, the motion to reconsider is laid on the table. Okay. All right. Our next item for consideration is H.R. 3423, the Facility for Runway Operations and Safe Transportation Act, or the FROST Act. And I ask unanimous consent to discharge the Subcommittee on Aviation from further consideration of H.R. 3423, and without objection, that is so ordered. I now call up the bill for consideration without objection. The first reading of the bill is dispensed with. The bill is now considered as read and open for amendment at any point. I now recognize Mr. Weed to offer his amendment in the nature of a substitute.
I have an amendment in the nature of a substitute at the desk.
Please designate.
An amendment in the nature of a substitute to H.R. 3423 offered by Mr. Weed.
I now recognize Mr. Weed for 5 minutes for your amendment.
So thank you, Mr. Chairman. H.R. 3423, the Facility for Runway Operations and Safe Transportation, or FROST Act, is a bipartisan proposal that would allow Airport Improvement Program funds to be used to acquire storage facilities for de-icing equipment and fluids, which are essential for ensuring safe and timely flight operations across the country. Aircraft are uniquely sensitive to any amount of ice and snow that accumulates on the airframe, causing irregularities that add weight, interrupt airflow, and can come loose during flight, potentially damaging critical flight systems. To prevent this, airports must invest in critical but expensive de-icing equipment and fluids to mitigate these disruptions and support safe flight operations. Currently, AIP funds may be used to acquire this equipment, yet storage facilities for it are explicitly excluded. This bill aims to fix that. I am proud to introduce this important legislation to provide for the proper storage of this critical equipment. I yield back.
Mr. Larson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I support H.R. 3423, the FROST Act, a bill that would make it easier for U.S. airports to store certain critical safety equipment. De-icing an aircraft is vital to maintaining safe flight operations, particularly during takeoff. Ice and snow accumulation on aircraft surfaces, particularly on wings, can reduce lift, limit airflow, and subsequently make the aircraft much harder for a pilot to control. That's why operators are federally mandated to use de-icing equipment when ice and snow accumulate on aircraft. This equipment is so important that improper use has been cited by the NTSB as a cause of multiple aviation accidents. The harmful effects of climate change have contributed to more extreme weather across the country, making de-icing fluids and equipment even more of a necessity in recent years. Thus, the ability for airport sponsors to store this equipment on property is essential to safe and efficient flight operations. The FROST Act will allow that, and I want to thank Representative Weed and Representative Skolton for sponsoring this important bipartisan bill. Urge my colleagues to support it, and with that, I yield back.
Thanks, Rick. I now recognize myself for 5 minutes, and basically all I want to say is you can use AIP dollars to purchase the equipment. There's no reason why you shouldn't be able to use AIP dollars to build the facilities to house it. With that, I yield back and recognize Ms. Skolton.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, Mr. Ranking Member, and grateful to Mr. Weed's common sense leadership here on the FROST Act. From Michigan, we certainly know a thing or two about icy cold winters, and this bill would ensure, of course, that airports can leverage the funding from the AIP program to store this de-icing fluids and equipment. As you said, Mr. Chairman, no reason you shouldn't be able to, if you can use it to purchase the equipment, you got to be able to use it for the storing. This will be critically important for airports in my district, like the Gerald R. Ford International Airport and the Muskegon County Airport, to keep flights moving during cold winters. I encourage my colleagues to support this common sense bill to ensure airports are well equipped for icy weather. Thank you. I yield back.
Does anyone else wish to be heard on the amendment? Seeing no one, are there any amendments to the amendment in the nature of a substitute to H.R. 3423? Seeing none, the question is now on the adoption of the amendment in the nature of a substitute to H.R. 3423. All those in favor signify by saying aye. All opposed signify by saying nay. The nays have it, and the amendment in the nature of a substitute is adopted. The question is now on the adoption and favorable reporting of H.R. 3423 as amended. All those in favor signify by saying aye. All opposed signify by saying nay. Opinion of the chair, the ayes have it. The ayes do have it. And H.R. 3423 as amended is agreed to and ordered favorably reported to the House. Without objection, the motion to reconsider is laid on the table. All right. Our next item for consideration is H.R. 3477, the Ensuring Airline Resiliency to Reduce Delays and Cancellations Act. I'd ask unanimous consent to discharge the Subcommittee on Aviation from further consideration of H.R. 3477. Without objection, that is so ordered. I now call up the bill for consideration. Without objection, the first reading of the bill is dispensed with. And the bill is now considered as read and open for amendment at any point. I recognize myself for 5 minutes. I do want to thank Mr. Larson, Mr. Cohen, for their work on this legislation and their leadership on this issue. This exact legislation was reported by unanimous consent by the committee last September, and I encourage my colleagues to once again support the legislation. We've seen numerous airline schedule collapses driven by both internal and external factors, and this bill is going to ensure that airlines have operational resiliency plans in place to consider specific factors, which includes how airlines can quickly and efficiently rebuild passenger and crew schedules. Additionally, the legislation is going to help ensure that passengers are not left stranded for days due to any lackluster airline responses to operational difficulties. A provision similar to this bill is included in the House-passed FAA reauthorization, but ultimately fell out of the bill during conference. Again, I do want to thank Mr. Larson and Mr. Cohen for your leadership on this issue, and I'd urge support of the legislation. With that, I recognize Rick.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I urge support for H.R. 3477, the Ensuring Airline Resiliency to Reduce Delays and Cancellations Act, my bill to help prevent or limit the impact of future mass flight disruptions on the traveling public. The last several weeks have highlighted the cascading impacts these disruptions can have on the National Airspace System, or the NAS. For instance, Newark International Airport has experienced 3 disruptions in less than 2 weeks due to aging air traffic control equipment and ongoing workforce challenges. I look forward to working with the Chair on advancing legislation that modernizes our ATC infrastructure, grows the aviation workforce, and prevents future disruptions. But these disruptions not only jeopardize the safety of the NAS, they also degrade the passenger experience and erode the public's confidence in the aviation system. During a flight cancellation or significant delay, passengers are often left with an impossible choice: pay potentially exorbitant fees to quickly rebook another flight, or be left stranded and forced to pay a number of unanticipated expenses, such as meals, hotels, and other incidental costs, until a return flight can be booked. Fortunately, the 2024 FAA reauthorization law works to mitigate the impacts of mass flight disruptions by ensuring consumers are entitled to a cash refund and requiring airlines to have reimbursement policies on meal, lodging, and other incidental costs during the disruption. Ultimately, though, adequate preparation and planning by airlines will often determine whether the impact of these disruptions on passengers will be mitigated. And when an airline is unprepared for these events, passengers pay the price. That's why I introduced the Ensuring Airline Resiliency to Reduce Delays and Cancellations Act. The bill requires the Department of Transportation to ensure airlines develop and regularly update an operational resiliency strategy to prevent or limit the impact of future flight disruptions on passengers. These operational resiliency plans would assess the potential impact of severe weather and other disruptive events on airline operations, staffing models, and information technology systems. Would assess the preparedness of the airline to maintain operations through disruptive events and how the airline plans to prevent and limit the impacts on passengers, and would assess the extent to which the airline addresses known cybersecurity risk, as well as any other issues the Secretary determines appropriate. The bill also calls on the GAO to evaluate the effectiveness of the airline's operational resiliency plans and issue a report on its findings to Congress. The bill will help protect consumers by simply ensuring airlines engage in long-term planning to prevent or mitigate the impact of future flight disruptions. As noted, the committee unanimously supported this legislation last year, and it's my hope we can do it again today. With that, thank you very much, and I yield back.
Mr. Cohen.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. As some of you know, and others will find out, I'll be leaving this committee soon to go on to intelligence, which I am on now. It was not an easy decision because I've enjoyed very much the work on this committee for the last 19 years, and there's a lot of important work to do for the public. But I'd had an 8-year interest in being on intelligence, and it finally came to the opportunity to have it. I'll be on leave, so there's a possibility I'll be back in 2026. So we'll see what happens with that. I appreciate Mr. Graves and Mr. Larson working with them on the FAA reauthorization, which was a great honor to be a part of that, and they did a great job putting it together. And I will miss them. I'll miss all my colleagues on this committee. I won't miss Mr. Crawford and Mr. Perry because they're already on intelligence. We're going to be together again over there. But be happy to call you Chairman Crawford. I will miss Mr. Oberstar, who was my first chairman and who I look at often, and Mr. Young, who was one of my best friends in Congress, and Young Schuster, and Mr. DeFazio. They'll still be here. This is one of my last bills in that final acts, and it's proud that it'll be a bill I work on with my friend, Mr. Larson. Our bill is timely, common sense legislation that deserves swift passage. In recent years, we've seen an alarming rise in flight disruptions, cancellations, delays, and system meltdowns that have stranded passengers and upended lives. From severe weather to airline IT failures to workforce shortages, these events have exposed real vulnerabilities in our aviation system. Travelers deserve an airline ticket that's reliable, resilient, and responsive. Our bill directs the Department of Transportation to require air carriers to develop and regularly update operational resiliency strategies to prevent or mitigate the impact of future disruptions. This legislation puts the traveling public first, not only by helping avoid cancellations, but by ensuring airlines have strong recovery plans in place when things go wrong. Passengers should not be forced to suffer because of preventable breakdowns in airline operations, whether it's Southwest holiday meltdown, staffing shortages, or climate-driven disruptions. We've seen the cost of inactions, and we must do better. The Ensuring Airline Resiliency to Reduce Delays and Cancellations Act takes the lessons of recent failures and turns them into forward-looking solutions that strengthen our entire aviation system. I again thank Ranking Member Larson for his leadership on this critical issue and for his working with him over the years in this committee. This bill isn't just about reacting to problems, it's about building an air traffic travel system that can withstand them. I urge my colleagues on both sides of the aisle to support this bill and help restore public confidence in our system. I yield back the balance of my time.
Mr. Perry.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Unfortunately, I'm not going to support this bill. In my opinion, it creates an unnecessary private sector mandate and seeks to empower the FAA to oversee the day-to-day airline operations regarding staffing, crew, scheduling, IT, cybersecurity risk, and other issues. The Secretary determines appropriate to protect consumers and maintain the operational stability of the airline industry. And I have plenty of criticisms for the airline industry, and I travel by air enough and have been held up and delayed and stayed overnight where I didn't want to stay enough to have problems with it, but I don't think this is the answer at all. These requirements will do little, in my opinion, to address the problems faced by the aviation industry, and instead will just create regulatory red tape that wastes time and resources at FAA and the airlines. It's going to be arbitrary and unknown and knee-jerk, and I don't think that's a good way to do things. A particular concern is the open-ended requirement subject to the Secretary's whims. And we might like the Secretary now, but we might not like who the Secretary is later. This vague delegation of authority to the Secretary has the potential for significant abuses that make the regulatory burdens envisioned by this bill significantly worse than those acknowledged by the supporters of the bill. With that, Mr. Chairman, I yield.
Does anyone else wish to be heard on the amendment? Seeing no one, are there any amendments to the amendment to H.R. 3477? Seeing none, we'll now proceed to the final passage of the legislation. The question is now on the adoption and favorable reporting of H.R. 3477. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed signify by saying nay.
Nay.
In the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it.
Mr. Chairman, on that, I request a recorded vote.
Gentleman requests a recorded vote as previously announced pursuant to Committee Rule 6F. Further proceedings on the question are postponed. Our next item for consideration is H.R. 2591, the Mental Health and Aviation Act, and I'd ask unanimous consent to discharge the Subcommittee on Aviation for further consideration of H.R. 2591. Without objection, that is so ordered. I now call up the bill for consideration. Without objection, the first reading of the bill is dispensed with. The bill is now considered as read and open for amendment at any point. I now recognize Ranking Member Larson to offer his amendment in the nature of a substitute.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have an amendment at the desk.
Designate.
An amendment in the nature of a substitute to H.R. 2591 offered by Ranking Member Larson.
Without objection, the amendment in the nature of a substitute is considered as read and shall be considered as the base text for the purposes of any further amendment. I now recognize Mr. Larson, 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, I urge support for the ANS to H.R. 2591, the Mental Health and Aviation Act, a bill to modernize the FAA's mental health policies and to remove barriers to life-saving care for the aviation workforce. For far too long, many aviation professionals have suffered in silence because of the fear that a mental health diagnosis or treatment could derail their careers. I, like many of my colleagues, have heard from constituents who struggle to navigate the FAA's aeromedical process, seen reports about the harmful impacts of mounting pressures on overworked and understaffed air traffic controllers and flight crews, and seen qualified airline pilots grounded for months due to delays with medical clearance reviews. In the aftermath of recent tragic aviation accidents and harrowing near misses across the country, as well as growing uncertainty at the FAA, we must support the mental health of the dedicated women and men who ensure the traveling public reach their destinations safely every day. That's why I'm very pleased to be an original co-sponsor of this bipartisan bill that builds on the critical reforms included in the 2024 FAA reauthorization law. Specifically, the ANS to HR 2591 requires the FAA to implement the recommendations of the Aviation Workforce Mental Health Task Group and the Mental Health and Aviation Medical Clearances Aviation Rulemaking Committee within 2 years and provide justification to Congress if it decides not to implement any of these recommendations. Directs the FAA to annually review and update its mental health-related policies for pilots and air traffic controllers in consultation with key stakeholders. Authorizes funding for the FAA to recruit and train additional aviation medical examiners, particularly those with mental health expertise, and establishes a public information campaign to help destigmatize mental health in U.S. aviation, as well as various technical corrections throughout the bill. The FAA's mental health protocols must evolve to foster an environment where the aviation workforce feels supported to seek resources and care, and the Mental Health and Aviation Act would do just that. I want to thank Representatives Caston, Stauber, and Mann for leading this important legislation and the 16 bipartisan members for co-sponsoring it. This legislation is also endorsed by nearly a dozen key aviation stakeholders, including U.S. airlines, air traffic controllers, general aviation, and the business aviation industry, airline pilots, and aerial firefighters, among several others. I encourage my colleagues to support the ANS to ensure the safety of U.S. skies and the well-being of a dedicated aviation workforce. With that, I yield back the balance of my time.
Now recognize myself for 5 minutes. This bill is going to build on the bipartisan work that this committee, from last Congress, and in holding the FAA accountable to Congress and the Aeromedical Innovation Modernization Working Group that recreated in the FAA reauthorization of 2024. So with that, I would urge support of the legislation and now recognize Mr. Stauber.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and I want to thank you and Ranking Member Larson for your leadership on this. I'd also like to thank my friend and colleague, Representative Caston, for helping lead this really important piece of legislation. Currently, pilots and air traffic controllers who seek mental health care are unfairly penalized. While aviation professionals are mandated to report if they seek mental health care, once they take that step, they are faced with delays, confusion, and broad regulations reference returning to work, if they're even allowed to return to work. This often means that relatively minor mental health concerns result in long wait times and derail careers for safe and well-trained pilots and air traffic controllers. In December of 2023, the FAA recognized the need to reform its current policies and establish the Mental Health and Aviation Medical Clearances Aviation Rulemaking Committee, or ARC, to identify barriers to mental health care for aviators and present recommendations to the FAA to address these challenges. The implementation of these recommendations was directed in Section 411 of the FAA reauthorization bill that we passed last year. Unfortunately, there was no required timeline for implementation, which is why I've introduced legislation with Congressman Caston, the Mental Health and Aviation Act, to ensure the timely implementation of Section 411. If we don't change how we handle mental health and aviation, we will exacerbate a culture of silence. Simply unacceptable. We want our pilots to be at the top of their game, and taking care of their mental health is a critical component to achieve that goal. Our pilots cannot fear that their livelihoods are at stake for taking care of themselves, nor can our air traffic controllers. Their efforts to take care of themselves are what keep our skies safe in the first place. And Mr. Chair, last week, ELPA had their fly-in, their legislative fly-in. Representative Caston and I had the opportunity to speak to those professional pilots while they were in D.C. Both of us specifically talked about this bill, Mr. Chair. Representative Caston relayed to me that after he was done speaking and left the room, or leaving the room, a pilot came up to him and said, "We lost one of our own Monday night. He took his own life." Simply unacceptable that we lose men and women, and in this case, in the aviation sector, because they don't have the mental health available when they need it. And that door's got to be open when they ask for it. As a former police officer, I understand the importance of taking care of ourselves, understand the importance of mental health and the concerns thereof. It takes a strong individual to ask for help when they need it. As a police officer, I did that twice. I continued a very successful police career because of that. The culture that we have to implement with aviation and air traffic controllers is that of being helpful on the outside to those that are hurting on the inside. Mr. Chair, Ranking Member Larson, I can't think of a more important bill in this package than to send this across the finish line so we can take care of our air traffic controllers and our professional pilots who are under stress daily, and we count on them with our lives, and so does the rest of the flying public. I urge all my colleagues to support this really good piece of legislation. Mr. Chair, and I yield back.
Ms. Poe.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and Ranking Member Larson. I am proud to lend my support to H.R. 2591, the Mental Health and Aviation Act, as well as the two other bills under consideration to reduce disruption to air traffic. My constituents have been in the forefront of delays and chaos at Newark Airport, caused by decades of insufficient investment in America's aviation infrastructure. I am glad to join my colleagues in supporting measures to make flying more predictable and reliable. I would note that the recent turmoil in American air traffic hasn't just impacted passengers. Air traffic controllers, pilots, flight attendants, and others have faced increased stressors as the hard work to keep the flying public safe. I applaud their advocacy to ensure that everyone who needs support for their mental health is able to receive it and that they are able to return to work when they are ready. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield back.
Mr. Perry.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. I intend to vote no on this bill. While it intends to provide a pathway for controllers and pilots to seek help for mental health conditions or symptoms of mental health conditions and disclose those conditions or symptoms, and I think that's a good thing. Unfortunately, I remain concerned that in doing so under this program, we're allowing for the conditions that may result in someone having a mental health crisis while in the cockpit, being allowed to remain in the cockpit or returning to the cockpit of an airplane with hundreds of souls on board, and that's something I can't support, and I yield the balance.
Mr. Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I rise today in strong support of this amendment because it speaks to something we don't talk about enough, which is the mental health of people who keep our skies safe. Their jobs demand precision, calm under pressure, and a commitment to safety that never takes a day off. But too often, these same professionals are made to feel like seeking help for their mental health is a threat to their careers. That kind of fear is dangerous, not just to them, but to all of us who depend on their judgment and focus. This amendment says enough. It says, we trust you. Your health matters. It ensures that no employee has to choose between their well-being and their job. In a year where we've seen multiple aviation incidents, the stakes couldn't be clearer. Safety doesn't just come from machines and regulations, it comes from people. We need our people to be healthy, supported, and able to speak up without fear of retribution. This is how we build a safer, stronger aviation system, one that treats its workforce with the trust and dignity they deserve. I urge my colleagues to support this amendment, and I yield back.
Mr. Kennedy.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm proud to stand with Representative Stauber, Mann, and Caston in supporting this legislation. I've been on the professional side with aviation professionals who came to me as a doctor and wanted to be clear to get an aviation license or to serve in these capacities and wanted their medical records cleared of any pejorative or stigmatizing mental health issues in an effort to try to artificially suggest that they had no issues with these problems so that they could actually get a job or to maintain their job. I'll just say the culture of silence that Representative Stauber referenced earlier is a real issue. Many of us in this room suffer from one version or another of a mental illness, and the stigma and pejorative nature of the historical considerations of this, we need to move beyond that. The reality is there are many treatments available. We need to encourage people to seek out those treatments. They can function in a normal, healthy capacity and be certified to actually serve in these capacities. And if we eliminate the capacity for politicians with mental health to serve in the Capitol and the important work that we do, many of us probably wouldn't be able to be here. I think we need to be careful about the pejorative, stigmatizing nature of this. I do share concerns with others on this committee about the $13+ million we're going to spend, $13 million that we will spend on this. I believe, and I have been told, that there's a significant backlog with medical examiners, so I'm willing to allow that consideration to move to the side for the important nature of this bill. But, Mr. Chair, I'm proud to support this legislation. I think it's moving us in the right direction, and with that, I yield back.
Does anyone else wish to be heard on the amendment?
Thank you, Chairman. I also want to associate myself with the comments of most of the members who have spoken. The pilots have been here. They have testified. Health professionals, mental health professionals support this. It's time that we do it, recognize a reality, and take responsible measures to provide assistance to those who are in need of it. Thank you.
Does anyone else wish to be heard on the amendment? Seeing no one, are there any amendments to the amendment in the nature of a substitute to H.R. 2591? Seeing none, the question is on the adoption of the amendment in the nature of a substitute to H.R. 2591. All those in favor signify by saying aye. All opposed signify by saying nay. In the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it. And the amendment in the nature of a substitute is adopted. The question is now on adoption of favorable reporting of H.R. 2591 as amended. All those in favor signify by saying aye. All opposed signify by saying nay. In the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it. The ayes do have it. And H.R. 2591 as amended is agreed to and ordered favorably reported to the House. Without objection, the motion to reconsider is laid on the table. Next is H.R. 3427, the Water Resources Technical Assistance Review Act. And I'd ask unanimous consent to discharge the Subcommittee on Water Resources and Environment from further consideration of H.R. 3427. Without objection, that is so ordered. And I now call up the bill for consideration. Without objection, the first reading of the bill is dispensed with. The bill is now considered, read, and open for amendment at any point. And I recognize Mr. Taylor to offer his amendment in the nature of a substitute.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have an amendment in the nature of a substitute at the desk.
Please designate.
An amendment in the nature of a substitute to H.R. 3427, offered by Mr. Taylor.
Without objection, the amendment in the nature of a substitute shall be considered as read and shall be considered as base text for purposes of further amendment. With that, I recognize Mr. Taylor for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chairman Graves, for allowing me to speak in favor of my bill, the Water Resources Technical Assistance Review Act. Access to clean and safe water should not be determined by where you live. The EPA established technical assistance programs such as Water TA to connect rural communities like those in my district with experts to help them access water infrastructure funding. As we all know, accessing federal funding can be a complicated and time-consuming process, especially for rural communities. Unfortunately, some of these programs have failed to provide adequate assistance to communities. As you travel through my district, many areas have water infrastructure that is well past its intended lifespan. And when these communities turn to the EPA's technical assistance programs, they face bureaucratic delays and complicated processes that hinder their ability to get assistance. By improving the TA programs, especially the water TA program, we can help those who are truly in need. My bill would direct the GAO to conduct a comprehensive study reviewing how the EPA identifies, selects, and partners with technical assistance providers, and provide recommendations on how the EPA can improve these TA programs. In the end, this will not only help connect communities with the resources they need to build and repair their critical water infrastructure, but it will ensure rural America is not left behind. For too long, Washington, D.C. has turned its back on rural America. I'm proud to lead this legislation that will help change that trend by improving the EPA's technical assistance programs. This will help rural communities across the country, including Southern Ohio, access federal funding opportunities to support essential clean water infrastructure like water treatment facilities. I also want to thank Congressman Figures for joining me in this effort, and I urge my colleagues to vote in favor of this legislation to help communities get the assistance they need to build or repair their critical water infrastructure. Thank you, Chairman. I yield back.
Mr. Larson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I support this legislation which directs the GAO to review technical assistance programs created to help economically distressed rural and tribal communities to obtain critical investment for their water infrastructure needs. Earlier this year, the Subcommittee on Water Resources and Environment heard testimony from state witnesses on how these programs are critical to economically disadvantaged communities. Without the seed money and direction provided by EPA, many economically distressed rural and tribal communities simply do not have the staff, the resources, or the capacity to even apply for federal assistance when it is available. This GAO study will help identify how EPA implements the technical assistance programs established in the Clean Water Act, as well as any essential services for economically distressed rural and tribal communities that continue to go unmet through these programs. I support this legislation and urge all members to do the same. With that, I yield back.
Does anyone else wish to be heard on the amendment? Many of us represent small. Mike, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I speak in support of H.R. 3427, which was introduced by the Vice Chair of the Water Resource and Environment Subcommittee, Mr. Taylor of Ohio. This legislation advances two important factors that we should have in mind here in Congress, which is effectiveness and accountability. Over the last several years, Congress has pumped billions of dollars into the Environmental Protection Agency clean water infrastructure programs. While it is imperative that Congress continues robust oversight of that funding, the Government Accountability Office review required in the underlying legislation will lead to program improvements and increased efficiency within EPA's technical assistance programs. Technical assistance programs help small and rural communities identify their water infrastructure needs and compete for EPA funding to help address those needs. In particular, I'm concerned that Water TA initiative established in 2023 has not met the needs of rural America, and I look forward to reviewing the findings in the GAO report about the Water TA initiative to get to the bottom of these issues and work with the Trump administration on critical improvements to the program. I urge my colleagues to support H.R. 3427, and I yield back.
Mr. Perry.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. While I don't disagree with the maker of the amendment, so to speak, or the bill, and that rural communities have been left behind, I certainly support a number of my own and represent them. This bill requires the GAO to evaluate EPA Water's TA initiative technical assistant, and in my view, the program is completely unnecessary. It's an unnecessary IRA program that we should eliminate. Well, I'm glad to see that GAO will evaluate the program to show us its deficiency. I'm concerned about the provision assessing the needs of certain communities not addressed through covered technical assistance and the potential, and quite honestly, not the potential, but the likelihood for this to expand the already unnecessary program. The program's unnecessary. We should just get rid of it and let the states handle this as they do so well. So with that, that's my feeling on the bill, and I yield the balance.
I want to thank Mr. Taylor for introducing the legislation. Again, many of us represent small, rural, and economically disadvantaged or distressed communities, and it's important that these technical programs are working for our constituents, and that's exactly what this bill does. So does anyone else wish to be heard on the underlying bill? Seeing no one, are there any amendments to the amendment? Mr. Perry.
Mr. Chairman, I've got an amendment to desk.
Designate.
An amendment to the amendment in the nature of a substitute to H.R. 3427 offered by Mr. Perry, number 037.
Without objection, the amendment will be considered as read. Mr. Perry, you recognize 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Overall, this bill requires GAO to evaluate a program that should be eliminated and is therefore unnecessary, but it should provide us with additional information about the ineffectiveness and waste in this program. Unfortunately, Section 2, Clause B5 threatens to undermine this work. This section is written in such a way that GAO will be forced to state that the program does not provide enough assistance, thus laying the groundwork for expansion of this already wasteful program. While I understand this might have been the result of negotiations, I would like to remind folks that we are currently in the majority, and though the minority didn't consult us when they jammed this program through in a partisan fashion, we should be running a bill to eliminate this program, but at the very least, we need to make sure this GAO report isn't rigged in favor of expanding this unnecessary program. So I urge support of the amendment, and I yield.
Mr. Larson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, this amendment removes a mandate for the GAO to examine if there are any needs of economically disadvantaged communities that are not currently being met by the Water Technical Assistance Program. As a result, I'm opposed to this amendment. As a reminder, this is the GAO study of the EPA's Water Technical Assistance Program. If we're going to mandate that GAO examine the program, we should ensure that GAO looks at what holes the EPA program is filling, as well as any holes that remain. The EPA Water Technical Assistance Program is essential for helping communities across the country access federal programs and funds. We should ensure the program is as effective as possible. I oppose this amendment, ask my colleagues to oppose it as well. And with that, I yield back.
Does anyone else wish to be heard on the amendment? Seeing no one?
I'll make sure I'm looking at it right.
Are there any amendments to the amendment? Seeing none, the question is on the amendment. All those in favor signify by saying aye. All opposed signify by saying nay. The opinion of the chair, the nays have it. The nays do have it. The amendment is not agreed to.
Well, that would cover many of you.
Are there any other amendments to the amendment in the nature of a substitute to H.R. 3427? Hearing none, the question is on the adoption of the amendment in the nature of a substitute to H.R. 3427. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed signify by saying nay. The opinion of the chair, the ayes have it, and the amendment in the nature of a substitute is adopted. The question is now on adoption and favorable reporting of H.R. 3427 as amended. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed signify by saying nay. In the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it. Gentlemen, request a recorded vote is previously announced pursuant to Committee Rule 6F. Further proceedings on the question will be postponed. Our next item for consideration is H.R. 3428, the Mid-Atlantic River Basins Commission Review Act, and I'd ask unanimous consent to discharge the Subcommittee on Water Resources and Environment from further consideration of H.R. 3428. Without objection, that is so ordered. I now call up the bill for consideration without objection. The first reading of the bill is dispensed with. The bill is now considered as read and open for amendment at any point. I recognize myself for 5 minutes for a statement. H.R. 3428, the Mid-Atlantic River Basins Commission's Review Act, is good government, and it also exercises Congress's right to conduct oversight over bodies that it charters. Congress has passed laws setting up the Susquehanna River Basin Commission, Delaware River Basin Commission, the Interstate Commission on the Potomac River Basin, and it did that decades ago. And even before the creation of the Environmental Protection Agency, it mandated federal membership in the commissions. Congress should monitor how these commissions are functioning and ensure that they are responsibly utilizing federal resources. I want to thank Representative Bresnahan for his work on this bill that directs the Government Accountability Office to take long overdue steps to review these commissions, including their ethics practices. I urge my colleagues to support H.R. 3428. Without, I recognize Mr. Larson for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, I support this legislation that directs the GAO to review the 3 Mid-Atlantic River Basin Commissions and report on the practices and federal responsibilities of each. The Mid-Atlantic River Basin Commissions serve an important role in the region by managing, protecting, and improving the respective river basins. The commissions were created to consolidate a complex web of state interstate and federal efforts into one. Today, they each represent a successful federal-state partnership in river basin planning, development, and regulation. This GAO study will review these partnerships and how responsibilities are split between the commissions and federal agencies, as well as examine the transparency and communication practices of the commissions. I support the legislation and urge all members to do the same. With that, I yield back.
Does anyone else wish to be heard on the amendment? Mr. Bresnahan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I am proud of this legislation, the Mid-Atlantic River Basin Commission Review Act. These river basin commissions are state compacts designed to regulate the river system within a watershed regardless of state lines. Since the inceptions after World War II, the rivers they manage have grown in importance to our populations, have grown, and water usage has increased. They have also played a role in protecting rivers from pollution and ensuring the ecosystems remain vibrant and resilient. This includes the Delaware River Basin Commission in my district. As their roles have grown, Congress has not always had insight into the exact responsibilities and tasks that the River Basin Commissions are undertaking. My legislation directs the GAO to conduct a study and compile recommendations of the Mid-Atlantic River Basin Commissions to ensure they have proper ethical policies in place, conduct an inventory of their federal responsibilities as well as best practices, and look to see if there are any of the responsibilities have become duplicative since their inceptions. My legislation then directs these river basin commissions to report back annually on how they are complying with these recommendations. GAO is the gold standard for federal reports. In fact, according to the GAO, 75% of their recommendations are implemented over a 4-year period. GAO has conducted numerous reports and studies of government agencies, and I trust that this proper oversight will help these river basin commissions find ways to improve their services to the citizens and the rivers they serve. I'd also like to thank Congressman Scott Perry for co-sponsoring this piece of legislation. Thank you. I yield back.
Mr. Collins.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I am proud to support H.R. 3428, which was introduced by my colleague from Pennsylvania, Mr. Bresnahan. The people of the 10th District of Georgia sent me to Congress to work to make sure that the federal government is efficient, effective, and accountable to the taxpayer. And while I may not represent the areas covered by the three river basin commissions, in this bill, I think we can all agree, no matter where we come from, that robust congressional oversight of these RBCs is needed. The RBCs were set up decades ago after Congress passed the compacts into law. At least one member of each commission is from the federal government. They are authorized to receive federal funding and often receive money from other federal agencies like the Environmental Protection Agency and the Army Corps of Engineers. These RBCs tend to fly under the radar, and it's time that Congress conducts oversight of them to make sure they are spending taxpayer dollars wisely and in accordance with the law. As federally authorized commissions, it's also important for Congress to make sure they are acting in both a transparent and ethical manner. I look forward to reviewing the findings of the GAO report required by this bill and ensuring these commissions are working for the communities they are supposed to serve. And I urge my colleagues to support this bill and yield back my time.
Mr. Perry.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. I want to begin by thanking Representative Bresnahan for this outstanding piece of legislation. His district should be proud of him and his work. This bill directs the GAO to review the Delaware, Susquehanna, and Potomac River Basin Commissions and their ethics, practices, public communication, and how each carries out its federal responsibilities. Over the past 50 years, these commissions have operated with little to no federal oversight, general impunity, quite honestly, leading to mismanaged funds, ethical concerns, and regulatory expansion well beyond anything originally envisioned or conceived. This review of the commissions is vital to ensure that they are appropriately using taxpayer and ratepayer resources and are not creating regulatory burdens beyond the scope of their authorities. The significant fees imposed upon those living in the river basin, as well as the use restrictions, have ballooned out of control, oftentimes without any possibility for redress whatsoever. Unfortunately, state investigations have raised significant questions about their use of taxpayer resources and the ethics with which they operate. Moreover, the Delaware River Basin Commission has been co-opted by radical environmentalists and have deprived Pennsylvanians of their mineral rights rather than abiding by the limited missions to which they were originally authorized. This report is an important first step. It's just a first step towards correcting and right-sizing these commissions to ensure responsible use of taxpayer funds and to end the harassment of Pennsylvanians and others in these commissions' jurisdictions by those commissions themselves. And so I thank the gentleman. I support the legislation and urge all others to support it as well. And with that, Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Does anyone else wish to be heard on the amendment in the nature of a substitute? All right. Seeing none, we're now considering the bill for amendments. For what purpose, Mr. Ezell? Seek recognition.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have an amendment at the desk.
Please designate.
An amendment to H.R. 3428 offered by Mr. Ezell of Mississippi, number 024.
Without objection, the amendment will be considered as read. Mr. Ezell, you're recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My amendment is simple and direct. It simply expands oversight to include my home state. The Mississippi River Commission, or the MRC, focuses on a large drainage basin. This basin includes portions of 31 states resembling a funnel that empties into the Gulf of America. MRC's primary mission is to improve navigation and manage flood control on the Mississippi River. For far too long, the watershed of the region, Mississippi and the Sound of Mississippi, has felt the pain of a lack of oversight from the Army Corps of Engineers. Expanding oversight is common sense. I appreciate Representative Persing for his help on this matter, but Mr. Chairman, I want to withdraw the amendment, but I do ask for some commitment from the committee to assist me going forward with this and a field hearing and some other options of cooperation so we can give this a little more attention.
Absolutely, and I commit to doing that. I know this is a regional issue, and there's some support and opposition. So we will see if we can find a solution and work on that. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. I yield back.
Are there any other amendments to H.R. 3428? Seeing none, we'll now proceed to final passage of the legislation. The question is now on the adoption and favorable reporting of H.R. 3428. All those in favor signify by saying aye. All opposed signify by saying nay. In the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it, and H.R. 3428 is agreed to and will be favorably reported to the House, and without objection, the motion to reconsider is laid on the table. Next. Up for consideration is H.R. 3424, the Shared Property Agency Collaboration and Engagement Act of 2025, or the Space Act of 2025. I'd ask unanimous consent to discharge the Subcommittee on Economic Development, Public Buildings, and Emergency Management from further consideration of H.R. 3424. Without objection, that is so ordered. Now call up the bill for consideration. Without objection, the first reading of the bill is dispensed with. The bill is now considered as read and open for amendment at any point. 3424 is the Space Act is going to help save some taxpayer dollars by helping to identify opportunities for federal agencies to increase the use of shared space arrangements. This act achieves the goal by building upon the public building reforms that this committee made last Congress in the Thomas R. Carper Water Resources Development Act of 2024. Specifically, the legislation directs the administrator of the General Services Administration to develop criteria that's going to facilitate the expanded use of space sharing and co-locating. It also requires the administrator to brief the relevant committees to ensure timely implementation. I want to thank Mr. Onder for this legislation, for his leadership on the important bill, and I want to help ensure the federal real estate portfolio is the right size. With that, I would urge support for this legislation. Recognize Mr. Larson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm pleased to speak in support of my bill, H.R. 3424, the Shared Property Agency Collaboration and Engagement Act, or SPACE Act. I'm grateful to Congressman Chris Pappas for co-leading this bipartisan effort to ensure greater efficiency and accountability to federal government real estate decisions. The General Services Administration, GSA, currently manages more than 8,300 owned and leased properties, totaling 363 million square feet. Yet many of these facilities are underused, duplicative, or poorly maintained. For example, in 2023, the GAO found that of 24 headquarter buildings, 17 of those agencies were using 25% or less of their capacity. Agencies often operate in silos. One agency leases new office space while another has empty square footage in the same city. There is no coordinated system to ensure agencies share space or consolidate operations when possible, and that lack of communication leads to wasted taxpayer dollars. The Space Act will direct the administrator of the GSA to identify barriers to federal agencies sharing space in federally owned or leased buildings and to develop solutions to overcome those barriers. This includes examining logistical, legal, regulatory, or cultural hurdles that prevent agencies from entering into shared use agreements, even when such agreements would save money and improve efficiency. Once the administrator completes this review, the GSA must report its findings and recommendations to the relevant committees of jurisdiction in both the House and the Senate. This is a fiscally responsible good government reform. It makes existing government work smarter. We shouldn't be asking taxpayers to fund more buildings, especially with a $36 trillion debt, when the federal government already has plenty of space that is being mismanaged or ignored. The Space Act promotes better use of what we already own, reducing waste and protecting taxpayer dollars. This is not a new idea. The GAO, the Public Buildings Reform Board, and numerous oversight bodies have repeatedly recommended this type of interagency cooperation to reduce costs and to improve management. Again, I want to thank Congressman Pappas for his work with me on this legislation. It is the kind of common sense, bipartisan approach that shows we can work together to fix real problems without adding bureaucracy or spending more money. The Space Act is about accountability and stewardship. I urge my colleagues to support H.R. 3424 and help us to move this important reform forward today.
With that, I will once again recognize Mr. Larson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I support H.R. 3424, the Shared Property Agency Collaboration and Engagement Act. This bill requires the administrator of the GSA to develop new criteria to help expand the use of office space sharing for federal agencies. By sharing amenities, space, and services, federal agencies can use shared space arrangements to make the most effective use of government-owned real estate. A pilot program conducted by GSA allowed 6 offices across the country to provide ready-to-use spaces conducive to cross-government collaboration while saving taxpayer dollars by reducing operational costs for federal agencies. This legislation will allow GSA to expand on these efforts by establishing standards for shared office spaces and measuring the success of this initiative. Mr. Chair, I support this bill to ensure that we are being good stewards of taxpayer funding when it comes to federal real estate and encourage all members to support the bill as well. And with that, I yield back.
Do any other members wish to be? Mr. Barrett.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm concerned that the ranking member and I seem to agree on so many things here, and I'm going to reevaluate my position. But at this moment, I certainly support the Space Act. Requires the GSA to work with tenants to identify concerns over shared space arrangements and to develop criteria for expanded space sharing and to identify special use space that can improve space sharing. It also requires the parties to establish objectives to quantify the success of the shared space framework. As the chairman of the Economic Development Subcommittee, I support this effort by Representative Onder to build upon the Use Act to further improve utilization rates of the federal real estate portfolio. With that, I yield the balance.
Does anyone else wish to be heard on the legislation? Seeing no one, are there any amendments to H.R. 3424? Seeing none, we'll now proceed to final passage of the legislation. The question is now on the adoption and favorable reporting of H.R. 3424. All those in favor signify by saying aye. All opposed signify by saying nay. The opinion of the chair, the ayes have it. The ayes do have it. And H.R. 3424 is agreed to and will be reported favorably to the House. Without objection, the motion to reconsider is laid on the table. Next item for consideration is H.R. 3425, the Personnel Oversight and Shift Tracking Act of 2025, or the Post Act of 2025. And I'd ask unanimous consent to discharge the Subcommittee on Economic Development, Public Buildings, and Emergency Management for further consideration of H.R. 3425. Without objection, that is so ordered. And now call up for consideration, the bill up for consideration. And without objection, the first reading of the bill will be dispensed with. The bill is now considered as read and open for amendment at any point. And I now recognize Mr. Kennedy to offer his amendment in the nature of a substitute.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have an amendment in the nature of a substitute at the desk.
Please designate.
An amendment in the nature of a substitute to H.R. 3425, offered by Mr. Kennedy of Utah.
Without objection, the amendment in the nature of a substitute shall be considered as read and shall be considered as the base text for the purposes of further amendment. I now recognize Mr. Kennedy for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman Graves and Ranking Member Larson, for the opportunity to speak today in support of my bipartisan bill, H.R. 3425, the Protective Officer Safety and Transparency Act, or POST Act. I would also like to thank my colleague, Representative Shomari Figures, for co-leading this important legislation with me. The Federal Protective Services, or FPS, is tasked with securing nearly 9,000 GSA leased and owned facilities nationwide. With a budget of $2.2 billion in fiscal year 2024, FPS oversees more than 15,000 contract guards, protective security officers, or PSOs, who serve as the first line of defense at our federal buildings. Yet despite the size and importance of FPS's mission, serious vulnerabilities remain in its oversight of these contract guards. A recent GAO investigation revealed that PSOs failed to detect concealed weapons, including batons and pepper spray, in half of all covert security tests. FPS does conduct these covert tests, but it lacks a standardized system to track, analyze, and respond to the results. The POST Act would close this critical gap by requiring the FPS director to establish and maintain a centralized database to capture covert test data, including details on why a guard failed to detect contraband. It would mandate quarterly analysis of this data to identify trends and training needs, and it requires targeted corrective training for guards who fail covert tests, helping to close performance gaps and strengthen public safety. This is a common sense reform that transforms data FPS is already collecting into actionable improvements, making our federal buildings safer for employees and the public. The POST Act also tackles another longstanding problem, FPS's broken shift tracking system. In 2018, FPS launched the Post Tracking System, or PTS, to modernize its paper-based guard sign-in process. Yet PTS remains unreliable, and FPS continues to rely on paper records as its official system of record. This outdated system has prevented FPS from informing tenant agencies about guard shortages, in some cases even forcing the closure of federal buildings to the public. The POST Act would require FPS to make a decision and develop an implementation plan within 6 months. Either fix the PTS or replace it with a modern, dependable solution. Mr. Chairman, these reforms are straightforward and urgently needed. They transform existing data into meaningful action, improve transparency, and strengthen the security of our federal buildings. I urge my colleagues to support the POST Act so we can make real progress in promoting oversight, accountability, and safety in our federal facilities and for the people who work in them every day. Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I yield back.
Mr. Larson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I support H.R. 3425, the POST Act of 2025. This bill requires the Director of Federal Protective Service to establish processes to strengthen oversight, performance, and accountability of contract security personnel engaged in the protections of buildings and grounds that are owned, occupied, or secured by the General Services Administration. FPS law enforcement officers and contract guards that support them risk their lives every day to protect the federal workers and the public by controlling access to government facilities and screening visitors for prohibited items. As part of these efforts, FPS investigators have covertly tested security at federal buildings to ensure the accuracy of these systems and have developed a tracking system to ensure guards are qualified and posts are staffed adequately. Despite these efforts, guards fail to detect prohibited items in about half of the 27 covert tests that the GAO investigators conducted in 2024. Additionally, the new FPS tracking system has not worked well enough to replace the old paper-based system. By improving FPS data collection and analysis and implementing the findings on these security tests, the agency will be better able to ensure the safety and security of federal buildings, employees, and the public. I support this legislation, urge all members to do the same, and with that, Mr. Chair, I yield back.
Any other members? Oh, Mr. Perry.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Again, I agree with the ranking member on H.R. 3425, the POST Act. This bill improves safety at federal buildings by linking contract guard training to demonstrated security failures and requiring updates to the personnel tracking system to ensure staffing at security posts and better communication with tenant agencies. These improvements address the significant security concerns identified by the oversight conducted by the Economic Development Subcommittee. As chairman of the subcommittee, I support this effort by Representative Kennedy to improve federal building security and ensure the responsible use of federal lands, and I yield.
Does anyone else wish to be heard? Seeing no one. Are there any amendments to the amendment in the nature of a substitute to H.R. 3425? Hearing none, the question is on the adoption of the amendment in the nature of a substitute to H.R. 3425. All those in favor signify by saying aye. All opposed signify by saying nay. Opinion of the chair, the ayes have it. The ayes do have it. The amendment in the nature of a substitute is adopted. And the question is now on the adoption of favorable reporting of H.R. 3425 as amended. All those in favor signify by saying aye. All opposed signify by saying nay. Opinion of the chair, the ayes have it. The ayes do have it. And H.R. 3425 as amended is agreed to and favorably reported to the House. Without objection, the motion to reconsider is laid on the table. Next item for consideration is H.R. 3426, the Courthouse Affordability and Space Efficiency Act 2025, or the CASE Act of 2025. And I'd ask unanimous consent to discharge the Subcommittee on Economic Development, Public Buildings, and Emergency Management from further consideration of H.R. 3426. Without objection, that is so ordered. And I now call up the bill for consideration. Without objection, the first reading of the bill is dispensed with. The bill is now considered read and open for amendment at any point. 3426, the CASE Act limits the size of courthouses by directing the GSA only to build space in new courthouses to accommodate courtroom sharing. Specifically, the CASE Act codifies the judiciary's current courtroom sharing policies for magistrates, senior and bankruptcy judges. But for larger courthouses, the bill also directs there can only be 2 courthouses for every 3 district judges, 2 courtrooms for every 3 district judges. The committee has reported out similar language in the past, and the subcommittee's hearing last month on courthouses reinforced the need for the legislation to protect the taxpayers against the court's tendency to overbuild and well beyond their actual courtroom space needs. I want to thank Mr. Shreve for his leadership on this and for working with Ms. Norton on this bipartisan bill. I'd urge support and recognize Mr. Larson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Support H.R. 3426, the CASE Act of 2025. This bill develops sharing guidelines for the construction of new federal courthouses to ensure these spaces are being effectively used and prevent potential overbuilding in order to save taxpayer dollars. By implementing these standards into the design guide for federal courthouses, the GSA will be able to reduce construction costs and ensure that existing spaces in courthouse complexes are being fully utilized. Over the last 45 years, the Government Accountability Office has compiled a large body of work on federal courthouse construction, much of it at the request of this committee. The GAO has found the judiciary has requested and received courthouses that are larger than the size authorized by Congress and more expensive to build and operate than Congress was aware of. The judiciary has tried to meet the concerns of Congress. The Judicial Conference revised its courtroom allocation plan assumptions. New courtroom construction projects are to be designed to facilitate courtroom sharing for senior district judges, magistrate judges, and bankruptcy judges. But there is still some cause for concern, and this legislation, by establishing sharing guidelines for active district judges, will help. I support this legislation and urge my colleagues to do the same. With that, yield back.
Mr. Shreve.
Thank you, Chairman Graves and Ranking Member Larson. For some time, Congress has recognized that our federal government has more space than it requires, costing U.S. taxpayers additional billions of dollars. Last year, Congress passed public building reforms to get our executive branch agencies to right-size their space requirements. Unfortunately, the judiciary hasn't come alongside yet. My legislation, the CASE Act, will direct the GSA to construct our federal courthouses and to only build courthouses that incorporate a sharing by all federal judges. The CASE Act codifies the court's current sharing policies for magistrates, senior and bankruptcy judges in larger courthouses of 10 or more active judges, and it will limit the number of courtrooms to 2 for every 3 judges. This is a standard based on data from courtroom usage and reviews by our GAO as to what would be reasonable from a sharing policy standpoint for our federal judges. This bill codifies the administration's approach to right-sizing our federal government and toward being good stewards of taxpayer dollars. The current design standards and typical government way of doing things is not in our taxpayers' best interest. Right now, each judge has his or her own courtroom space, meaning that these facilities oftentimes sit empty. The GSA is required still today to build for standards to account for potential judges, despite not having any new judgeships authorized by Congress for 30 years now. This is common sense and makes taxpayer money go a little further. Most Americans live within their means, and of course, we need to as well. I want to thank Ms. Norton for joining me on this legislation and for her work on this issue. I yield back.
Mr. Perry.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. This bill optimizes courthouse space usage and informs future construction through a policy of courtroom sharing. This addresses the concerns raised at the most recent Economic Development Subcommittee about the utilization of courthouse space. As chairman of the subcommittee, I strongly support this effort by Representative Shreve and Delegate Norton. Urge my colleagues to do the same and yield the ballots.
Does anyone else wish to be heard? Seeing no one, are there any amendments to H.R. 3426? Seeing none, we'll proceed to final passage of the legislation. The question is now on the adoption and favorable reporting of H.R. 3426. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All opposed signify by saying nay. Opinion of the chair, the ayes have it. The ayes do have it. H.R. 3426 is agreed to and will be favorably reported to the House. Without objection, the motion to reconsider is laid on the table. Okay, we're down to our last two bills, so we'll be about 15 more minutes. So tell staff, start getting people back here for the votes. Our next item for consideration is our 30 resolutions for projects in GSA Capital Investment and Leasing Program. And I'd ask unanimous consent to call up the resolutions en bloc. They are now considered as read and open for amendment at any point. Without objection, that is so ordered. I'd recognize myself for 5 minutes on the statement on the GSA resolutions en bloc. The 30 GSA resolutions we are considering today include 28 leasing projects for the VA health care clinics across the nation that support our veterans. I also want to thank the Committee on Veterans Affairs for working with us to review and clear these projects. In addition, the resolutions include leases for the National Transportation Safety Board and the Department of Defense that are expiring. And with that, I urge my colleagues to support these resolutions. I now recognize Mr. Larson for a statement on the resolutions.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, I support the 30 leasing resolutions before us today. 28 of them will permit the GSA to provide space for VA clinics and medical centers throughout the country. These clinics and centers will help the VA deliver timely, accessible, and high-quality benefits, care, and services to meet the unique needs of veterans and all eligible beneficiaries. Another resolution will permit the GSA to extend the lease of the National Transportation Safety Board, the NTSB. The NTSB has occupied space in the same building since 2010 in Washington, D.C. The proposed lease will allow NTSB to carry out its essential mission of investigating accidents and events and issuing safety recommendations across various modes of transportation, including civil aviation, rail, transit, highways, marine, and pipelines. I support these resolutions and urge my colleagues to do the same. With that, I yield back.
Mr. Boss, who's chairman of the Veterans Affairs Committee, worked real close with us on this, and also a member of this committee. Mr. Boss, you recognize.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to thank you and your staff for working very closely with my staff to draft the VA FY25 and PACT Act lease resolutions before us today. These leases really do matter. These leases enable us to expand VA footprint by ensuring that the department can deliver care to veterans throughout the country. Whether it's a new clinic, expanding a facility, or a community living center, this is about making sure that veterans have access to VA care in the communities they call home. As chairman of the House Veterans Affairs Committee, I'm committed to investing in the infrastructure VA needs to meet the growing demand for services and to keep up with the needs of today's veterans. Once again, I want to thank my friend Chairman Graves and his staff for working with us, and I support this resolution. I urge all of my colleagues to do the same, and I yield back.
Does anyone else wish to be heard on the bill? Seeing no one. Are there any amendments to the GSA resolutions en bloc? Seeing none, the question is now on adoption of the GSA resolutions en bloc. All those in favor signify by saying aye. All opposed signify by saying nay. Opinion of the chair, the ayes have it. The ayes do have it, and the GSA resolutions en bloc are agreed to and approved. We're down to our last bill. Make sure members are on their way or get in here quickly. Our next item for consideration is H.R. 3331, the Mariner Exam Modernization Act. And I'd ask unanimous consent to discharge the Subcommittee on Coast Guard and Maritime Transportation for further consideration of H.R. 3331. Without objection, that is so ordered. I now call up the bill for consideration. Without objection, the first reading of the bill is dispensed with. The bill is now considered as read and open for amendment at any point. I recognize myself quickly for 5 minutes. H.R. 3331 will increase the practicality of the United States Merchant Mariner exam. As with all modes of transportation, training often enhances safety, and whether operators are mariners or they're truck drivers or they're pilots or they're train engineers, training and testing is vital to reducing accidents and increasing safety. This bill aims to provide critical oversight into the exam that mariners are required to pass prior to crewing American-flagged vessels, which are among the safest in the world. It is imperative that we mandate a continuous review of the exam to ensure it reflects the most modern technology and practices available in the maritime industry. The task that we are asking our American mariners to accomplish is inherently dangerous, and we owe the brave men and women that take up this calling a credentialing exam that reflects the modern world in which they will be operating. 3331 is going to ensure that the credentialing is devoid of outdated questions, content, and redundant training topics to guarantee that the exam reflects the current procedures and technology that exists within the maritime transportation industry. I now recognize Mr. Larson for his statement on the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I support H.R. 3331 because we need to do everything we can to promote careers in U.S. maritime. Throughout my time in Congress, I've supported increases of the Maritime Security Program, the creation of the Tanker Security Program, legislation to ease the transition from military service to maritime jobs, and efforts to bolster maritime training. This bill continues these efforts to bolster the industry by ensuring that the tests required to become a merchant mariner reflect the knowledge needed today to do the job. I want to thank Ranking Member Carbajal and Chair Ezell for taking a lead on this issue. I support passage of the bill and encourage every member to do the same. With that, I yield back.
Does anyone else wish to be heard on the underlying bill? Mr. Carbajal.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would like to express my support for my bill, H.R. 3331, the Mariner Exam Modernization Act. I thank Chair Ezell for co-leading this important bipartisan legislation as we look for ways to increase the number of talented merchant mariners by decreasing the redundant and outdated testing standards. As ranking member of the Coast Guard and Maritime Transportation Subcommittee, I and other stakeholders have been keenly aware of the many obstacles to becoming and staying merchant mariner. My bill is a common sense approach to modernizing the merchant mariner credentialing exam. For years, maritime training centers have provided feedback to the Coast Guard about outdated testing criteria as the industry has grown and adapted to the new technologies available. Unfortunately, little has changed. With this legislation, the updated credentialing system will finally reflect the current realities of serving today's maritime environment. Chair Ezell and I already worked on many issues affecting the maritime industry. We must proceed on all fronts in order to regain American maritime dominance to ensure our economic and national security interests. Not only is this bill a bipartisan effort, but the maritime industry is wholly supportive. Several industry partners have provided support for my bill, including the USA Maritime Unions, the Navy League, and the Consortium of State Maritime Academies, and many others. I look forward to my bill becoming law as it is one more step forward in bolstering our American maritime industry and catching up with 21st century standards. Mr. Chair, I yield back.
Mr. Perry.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. I'm feeling better about my situation with the ranking member at this moment because I'm going to oppose this. This bill creates a working group to evaluate the current mariner examination that mariners must pass to operate U.S. commercial vessels and develop a modernization plan to update the exam. It all sounds good, but while modernizing the exam to make it more relevant and better aligned with current maritime industry standards, practices, and technologies is a laudable goal, we must ensure that this effort is not used by those who wish to lower standards to expand the available number of mariners. That is the wrong motivation. To that end, I'm very concerned about provision D2 Charlie, requiring the development, and I quote, the development of methods to collect examination data on pass and fail rates, get this, for questions and the overall examination for future analysis and comparison use, unquote. This analysis has the potential to be used by those who seek to lower standards by eliminating the difficult questions from the test and ensuring it becomes easier to pass. Like, that's not headed in the right direction. More broadly, the last thing we need is a repeat of the Obama administration's decision to lower testing standards for air traffic controllers by replacing the skills-based SAT test with a biographical assessment test. While President Trump brought this practice to an end during his first administration, the staffing crisis our ATC system faces today is at least partially due to a washout rate of underqualified folks getting through based on lower standards. In other words, we don't want to rubber stamp folks onto the job only for them to quit because they are in over their heads, and the time to find out is not when you're piloting a huge vessel through some port where there might be a bridge abutment that you might have to miss. And so, unfortunately, with that, Mr. Chairman, I'm going to oppose the bill and urge my colleagues to do the same, and I yield the balance.
Mr. Zell.
Mr. Chairman, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I rise today in support of H.R. 3331, which was introduced by my colleague from California, Mr. Carbajal. I speak today in support of H.R. 3331 as an original co-sponsor of the legislation, which improves the accuracy, relevance, transparency, and oversight of the merchant mariner credentialing examination. This bill ensures that our nation's mariners who perform critical functions within the supply chain of the United States are being held to the highest standard of testing and are receiving the most modernized training that reflect today's technologies and standards. The credentialing of mariners is a vital aspect of safety for maritime workers within the United States, ensuring that only those that meet the rigorous standard set by the mariner exam are operating on domestic fleet of American flagged vessels. President Trump and Secretary Duffy have made it very clear that bolstering the maritime workforce and its operating capacity are vital elements to the success of the American economy. This bill guarantees that exam takers are prepared to fulfill the needs of the modern maritime industry. By adopting this measure, we can ensure the existence of a robust maritime transportation system for the foreseeable future, staffed with well-trained workforce that is ready to serve the needs of the American people. We have seen evidence in recent years of the impact that foreign mariners can have when operating large vessels without the same standard of training that we require at home. The disaster in Baltimore and the blockage of the Suez Canal are two examples that illustrate the connection between maritime transportation and the global supply chain. These incidents alone highlight the necessity of ensuring the United States merchant mariner exam is as modernized as possible. It is just good practice for us to conduct an in-depth review to ensure that this is the case. I urge my colleagues to support this bill. Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Anyone else wish to be heard? Seeing no one. Lamaffa.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I had some of the similar concerns I heard Mr. Perry expressing on that with, and I'm sure the intent of the author and the co-author on this are very good on that, but when, to what criteria will a working group or others be seeking to modernize topics and core competencies, outdated topics, things like that? And I'd be happy to yield time to Mr. Ezell if you wish to drill down a little bit more on that.
I'll stand by my statement.
Okay, how about Mr. Carbajal? You want to drill down a little more on what will be the
Thank you. Well, Mr.
consulting
Lamalfa,
working group and such?
I think there's already a process by which the questions are evaluated. Industry is the one that really asked for this language, and I think there's a general consensus that this is typical of questions that are asked in any other evaluation tool.
All right, I don't get rousing confidence out of that. Mr. Perry, would you do a little more time on that? Do you have any more on that thought?
Do you say, can I yield more time?
I'll yield you a little time if you wish.
Well, again, I don't know how this is going to be evaluated or determined, and if you're looking question by question, it seems to me that the purpose for doing that would be to say, well, this question must be too hard, and we got to get rid of it because it's precluding applicants from passing the test. If the question's hard, like quite honestly, those are the questions I want applicants to be able to answer correctly because the job that they're doing is critical, dangerous, and needs to be, you need to be proficient. And so too oftentimes, I think in our society, we're interested in lowering the standards for the sake of making sure more people can avail themselves to whatever the vocation is. The vocation is difficult because the vocation is difficult. It's just a fact of reality. And while we're all equal in God's eyes and certainly equal under the law, we're not all equal in proficiency at certain things. And when you find out after the fact where lives are at risk, it's too late. And so I'm very concerned about that language based on past practices and past realities. And so
yeah, all right.
if that can be addressed, then I'll reconsider it. But the bill is as written the way it is, and it leaves that wide open. And I think it's reasonable cause for reasonable concern.
Thank you, Mr. Perry. I'll reclaim my time on that. So, the section says the commandant may not use questions developed for use in credentialing examination until such questions are reviewed and approved by the working group. And I don't know, I'm not sure how the working group is formed, who they're made up of. Is this going to be another exercise in DEI that has gotten us so much trouble in other things? I guess I'd sure like to hear more about how some of that methodology would be before we, in my concern, loosen up. And I might be all wrong, I don't know. But loosen up standards for that, for something as important as merchant marine. So I'll yield back. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Does anyone else wish to be heard on the bill? Seeing no one, we are now considering the bill for amendments. For what purpose, Mr. Carvajal? Seek recognition.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My amendment makes a simple change and adds one representative from the U.S.
We got to designate.
Mr. Chair, I have an amendment at the desk.
Designate.
An amendment to H.R. 3331 offered by Mr. Carbajal of California, number 034.
Without objection, the amendment will be considered as read. Salute, you recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My amendment makes a simple change and adds one representative from the U.S. Merchant Marine Academy to the working group. I ask my colleagues to support this amendment. With that, I yield back, Mr. Chair.
Do the other members wish to be recognized on the amendment? It's a technical amendment. Seeing no one, are there any amendments to the amendment? Seeing none, the question is now on the amendment. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All opposed signify by saying nay. The ayes have it. The amendment is agreed to. Are there any other amendments to H.R. 3031? Seeing none, we will now proceed to final passage of legislation. The question is now on the adoption and favorable reporting of H.R. 3031. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All opposed signify by saying nay. In the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it.
Mr. Chairman, I request a recorded vote.
The gentleman requested a recorded vote as previously announced pursuant to Committee Rule 6F. Further proceedings on the question are postponed. While we're waiting on members to get up here to vote, I want to take just a moment to recognize somebody who has been with me every step of the way since I first became the Republican leader of this committee 6.5 years ago. And this is someone who's made a tremendous impact on this committee throughout that time. So it's my staff director, Jack Ruddy, who's sitting next to me. Jack is leaving the Hill this week after 15 years. I wasn't sure he would ever make it this far. Jack started out in my office as an intern, and then he came back for another internship, and then another, and then another. He did that 5 times. No matter how hard I tried, I couldn't get rid of this guy. But I'm incredibly thank you that he kept coming back, because my congressional office and then my committee, they have benefited greatly from his public service and his dedication and expertise. After serving as my legislative director in my congressional office, Jack has been with me at the T&I committee since 2019. First, he served as a Republican deputy staff director, and since, since 2022, he has led my T&I team as the full staff director. I've served on T&I since I first came to Congress in 2001, and I've seen a number of very excellent staff on this committee on both sides of the aisle. And I can tell you that Jack ranks among the very best of them. And over the years, he's played a very integral role in shepherding through this committee and through Congress many of our legislative priorities, my legislative priorities, that's going to improve America's transportation network and to build on our infrastructure. This includes aviation safety legislation, multiple WRDA bills, Coast Guard reauthorizations, public buildings and federal office space reforms, pipeline safety authorization. That's just to name a few things. He's also been my right-hand person for some of my proudest accomplishments, one of my proudest accomplishments in Congress, and that's the bipartisan FAA Reauthorization Act that we passed last year. Now, maybe we could have passed that bill without him. I guess we'll never know that for sure. But I am, without a doubt, extremely glad that I had Jack at the stick for that legislation. Everybody knows how important it is to our success to have good staff. And it takes hard work, skill, and extensive knowledge and a deep understanding of the legislative dynamics to develop legislation, to build a consensus, and see it through to the end of the legislative process. And Jack has all of those qualities. But it takes sacrifice, and I do want to mention and thank his wife, Paige, and their 2 boys, Joel and Barrett, for their countless hours and days and nights and weekends that they have sacrificed so that Jack could help ensure that this would be the very best committee in Congress. And finally, I want to say that anybody who has ever worked for Jack knows that he is fair, he's pragmatic, and he knows how to get the job done. And he's proven that over and over and over and over again. But speaking from my own personal experience, the most important thing that anyone who's ever worked with Jack knows that he's just simply a true friend. And I'm going to miss him. Our staff is going to miss him. This committee is going to miss him. And I wish him and his family the very best as he moves forward in his new chapter, in his career, in his life. So thanks, Jack, for everything that you've done. Mr. Larson.
Mr. Chair, first off, I want to thank Subcommittee Chair Perry for calling for a recorded vote so that we could all be here to thank Jack for his service to the committee. I want to recognize Jack from this side of the aisle. I wish him best as he leaves for Congress after 15 years here, and including 6.5 on the committee. During his time as staff director, 2.5 years of which I've been the ranking member, T&I has passed impactful bipartisan bills that have moved the ball on a number of issues. And from our work on the FAA reauthorization last year to WRDA 2024 and multiple WRDA bills, including the first reauthorization of the EDA in more than 15 years. Jack has been a trusted partner, an effective negotiator, a worthy adversary for our staff as well. And even when we disagreed, Jack was never disagreeable. He worked to find common ground. I mentioned this story on the Hill, on the floor the other day, where we were negotiating the FAA bill. I was on Whidbey Island in my district in Washington State. Sam was on Midway Island in the middle of the Pacific, and Jack was able to get us connected so we could solve some outstanding issues across time zones, and probably on different days, if I'm not mistaken, if I got Midway right on my longitude. So he's done anything and everything possible to move the issues forward on this committee, and really appreciated all of his efforts. And we want to say thank you to Jack, and good luck in your future endeavor as well. With that, I yield back.
Mr. Crawford.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to just take a moment of personal privilege to join with so many others here today, recognizing Jack Ruddy and wishing him well in his future endeavors. We all know that staff makes things work around here, and Jack's been a steady hand at the helm of the committee for many years now. As a former subcommittee chair and as a full committee vice chair now, I can attest to seeing firsthand how hard Jack works to serve this committee, its members, and the American people. Committee members always get the glory when a bill passes, but every member knows we couldn't be as successful as we are without the work of our staff. There are a lot of committees that create fireworks around here, but that's not T&I. We work hard, we get things done, and I think that's a testament to the work ethic and the ethos that Jack has instilled in his team. Thanks, Jack, for all your hard work. We appreciate it. Your friendship over the years, you will certainly be missed, and we all wish you the best of luck and Godspeed.
Salute.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This committee has been, for the most part, very bipartisan, and I think that staff have a lot to do with that as well. And I've worked with Jack over the years, have traveled with Jack, know Jack in a karaoke setting, and he's just a consummate professional, always smiling, always helpful, and I just want to wish you the best, Jack, and thank you for your public service. You're a true consummate professional, and I've always appreciated your bipartisan approach to things. Congratulations on your retirement. And that karaoke, keep going.
Daniel.
Thank you, Chairman. I appreciate it, and thank you for your years of service, Jack. They've been awesome. You've been a strong, steady leader for all of us, and not just the chairman. I mean, he got the brunt of it, but you helped all of us, and we appreciate it. Your knowledge, your advocacy made a big difference in what happened in the final product of whatever we're working on. Benefit the lives and livelihoods of people in my district and also across the country. It's really great. And thank you for working with me and our staff, our team. Wish you all the best in the road ahead. Yield back.
Scott.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. I'm one of the more quiet members of the committee, but I'm going to break the silence here to talk about Jack a little bit. It's been a long time, and this is a tough committee with different competing interests, and Jack and I haven't agreed on everything, and I'm proud to say that every time we haven't agreed, Jack's been wrong. But I will tell you, in Washington, what seems to me is oftentimes uncommon is that Jack has always been a straight shooter and been fair and allowed, at least as far as I'm concerned and as far as I can see, every legislator here to represent their district, represent their viewpoints, and get an honest shake at realizing their goals. And that's an uncommon thing. And I just applaud Jack for that. He's always been cheerful, regardless of the news. I've tried to make it easy on him. I think I've made it interesting for him. And look, he's going to do great things. I'm sure we're going to see Jack again in another role, but I wish you all the success in the future. You certainly have earned it. God bless you.
David.
Well, Jack, I think you've been pretty successful with Mr. Perry over here. When I first got to Congress, Mr. Perry was offering 500 amendments. Now he's down to about 23 or so, I think. That's pretty good progress. Now, I can't say much more than what everybody has already said, other than thank you for your help. You've been a great advisor to me, a great friend, helped me navigate some situations that were not of my own making, which I greatly appreciate, and we're going to miss you. I yield back.
Collins.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You know, looking at Jack, I can understand why you made him intern 5 years, 5 times. No, I'm joking, man. It's but I did want to weigh in and say thank you for what you've done for the committee. Not to inflate Perry's ego anymore, but he was hitting the nail on the head. You've always been transparent, very professional, and you know, accessible, knowledgeable, and understanding in what we've talked about and in the areas that we've had discussions on. So congratulations. Good luck out there in the future, and we can never help you with anything. You just let me know. I yield back.
Mike.
I wanted to let you know what a gentleman he is. I went on my first Codell last year with T&I, and it was a great experience, but it's long and it's work. And I thought we were going to get a little time off, but Jack and others had different plans for us. But what I'd like to say on our way back, I mean, I was totally exhausted, tired, wore out like everybody else. My wife was with me, and we had all that luggage and all those gifts that we had to buy while over there. And as we got back, our ride was unable to come pick us up, adding how tired we were and everything. I looked at Jack, who was trying to hurriedly get to go pick his child up from school, and I said, "Bud, can you give us a ride?" And without hesitation, absolutely, no questions asked, just volunteered, put his own self-interest aside, and that's just what kind of man he is. And I just want to say thank you for your kindness and for your support of this committee, and especially when we have good donuts, which is cop food, and so I hope your predecessor understands we need donuts.
Anybody else? Well, congratulations, Jack. And as I've always told him, money's in the hallway. It's not in the chamber, or in this case, the hearing room. So I'm sure he's going to go on to bigger and better things, and I'm sure you'll see more of him around in the future. So with that, again, thanks, Jack. Thanks for everything. The committee previously postponed proceedings on H.R. 3477, which was agreed to by voice vote. The question is now on favorably reporting H.R. 3477. Previously postponed. Is recorded vote still requested? Is recorded vote still requested? Yes. As a recorded vote is still requested, members will record their votes using the electronic voting system. The chairman will be voting aye.
Ranking will be voting aye.
Open the board. Do what? Nels and both of those aren't here. Ms. Huffman? Not here. Okay. Okay. Close the board. Report the tally.
Mr. Chairman, on that vote, there are 57 yeas and 7 nays.
By a vote of 57 yeas, 7 nays, the bill is agreed to and will be favorably reported to the House. Without objection, the motion to reconsider is laid on the table. Committee previously postponed proceedings on H.R. 3427, which was agreed to by voice vote. Is a vote still requested? The question is now on favorably reporting H.R. 3427 as amended, which was previously postponed. Okay, open the board. And the chairman will be voting aye.
Ranking will vote aye.
Oh, shit. Is that a twin brother? All right, does anyone wish to change their vote? Has everyone voted? I think so. Close the board, report the tally.
Mr. Chairman, on that vote, there are 61 yeas and 3 nays.
A vote of 61 yeas and 3 nays. The bill is agreed to and will be favorably reported to the House. Without objection, the motion to reconsider is laid on the table. Committee previously postponed proceedings on H.R. 3331 as amended, which was agreed to by voice vote. Question is now on favorably reporting H.R. 3331 as amended. Previously postponed is a recorded vote still requested. It is. The chairman intends to vote aye.
Ranking will vote aye.
Open the board. Does anyone wish to change their vote? Has everyone voted that intends to vote? I close the board.
Mr. Chairman, on that vote, there are 52 yeas and 12 nays.
By a vote of 52 yeas and 12 nays, the bill is agreed to and will be favorably reported to the House. And without objection, the motion to reconsider is laid on the table. Thank you all for participating in today's markup. I'd ask unanimous consent that each measure ordered reported today be reported as a single amendment in the nature of a substitute, incorporating any amendments adopted. Without objection, that is so ordered. And I'd ask unanimous consent the staff be authorized to make all necessary technical, clarifying, and conforming changes to each of the measures ordered reported favorably to reflect the actions of the committee. Without objection, that is so ordered. Pursuant to House Rule 22, Clause 1, I'd ask unanimous consent that the chairman of this or his designee be authorized to offer such motions as may be necessary in the House to go to conference with the Senate on legislation adopted today in a similar measure. Without objection, that is so ordered. I ask unanimous consent. The chairman, after consultation with the ranking member, have authority to strike or revise any provision of the measures ordered reported today that would cause a sequential referral to another committee or that would cause the bill to be subject to the Budget Act or Rule 21 cut-go point of order. Without objection, that is so ordered. Pursuant to House Rule 11, Clause 2L, I'd ask unanimous consent that all members of the committee have at least 2 calendar days in which to file any supplemental minority additional dissenting views on the legislation adopted today. Without objection, that is so ordered. Pursuant to Rule 6 of the Rules of the Committee on Transportation Infrastructure, I note the presence of a quorum for all actions on all committee business today. With that, the Committee on Transportation Infrastructure has completed its business, and the committee stands adjourned.